President Biden, he announced the student loan relief or student loan forgiveness. And a lot of people still aren't really sure about what it really means because they know the Supreme Court rejected a larger plan last week, but they were still able to actually get something through. And people want to know, am I eligible? What does this mean for me personally? Is this going to affect me? So what's your thoughts and what happened with this student loan relief situation?
So based on the most recent announcement, if you were on an income-based repayment plan and you've been paying your student loans off for the last 20 years or 25 years, depending upon the plan, your student loans are about to be forgiven in the next month outright. Done, forgiven. That's going to impact 803,000 Americans across the country. We're still gathering the numbers in terms of how many it impacts in our district. We are still also seeking clarity to find out if you were making payments for 20 years but not part of an income-based repayment plan, are you going to be eligible? I believe the short answer is yes to that, but I still need to get clarity on that. So that's what that recent announcement meant, which is obviously a huge deal based on the Supreme Court shooting down the president's more ambitious plan, which would have, had a tremendous impact on many more borrowers. And the Supreme Court's decision there was BS. And we'll get into that, hopefully, because I want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, let's go there, right? Because the original plan was for 37 million people to be impacted by student loan forgiveness. I was sitting here waiting. We know that the payments are going to start being reenacted in the next couple of months, and so people are looking at that from an economical standpoint, like, well, we haven't paid in 3 years. Now this is another thing that we have to add to our payments on our monthly basis. So what happened there? 37 million. Yes, 800,000 people are going to be impacted by the recent ruling, but there's that big gap of almost 36 million people who are looking at it like, what happened? We had an opportunity to help our economy by relieving some debt and having people have disposable income that they could potentially invest in real estate and other things.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say we should give President Biden credit for continuing the pause over these last few years. I know we go after Biden for a lot of issues, as we should, but definitely give him credit, because this pause, it was started under the Trump administration, but Biden continued it for an additional couple of years. So that put more money in people's pocket every month for the last couple of years. So let's give him credit for that. So this case, first of all, there's something called the HEROES Act that Congress passed in 2003, which in response to a national emergency gives the Secretary of Education latitude and the power to waive or forgive student loans or provide some sort of redress so that we are not harming borrowers during a national emergency. This was initially, something like this was initially done during the Gulf War, where people who were off to war and the nation was in the middle of a war, we didn't want to, hurt borrowers at that time. So Congress passed legislation to give the Secretary of Education opportunity to waive payments or reduce payments during that time. It was repeated after 9/11. We all remember what was going on during 9/11. After that, that led to the war in Afghanistan and the Iraq War. There was a reprieve that occurred during that time. But in 2003, Congress said, you know what? We need a piece of legislation that gives the secretary the power to respond to any national emergency. So Congress passed the HEROES Act. So under the jurisdiction of the HEROES Act, the Secretary of Education has the power, and the president has the power to waive or cancel student debt. The Supreme Court argued against this based on an argument that came from a party that isn't even harmed by the cancellation of the debt. And that's a key point here. In order for you to argue a case in front of the Supreme Court, you have to be able to express harm at a party. You have to be a party that was harmed by something in order to argue the case. The state of Michigan Missouri, excuse me, argued on behalf of a third party, in this case, expressing harm based on the president forgiving this debt, which is complete nonsense. The third party that they argued for, Mohila is the name of the company, was not even involved in a lawsuit at all. And the Supreme Court shouldn't have heard the case. They still heard the case anyway, heard the case, heard the arguments, decided in favor of Mohila, a third party who wasn't even involved in the case, and shot down the president's cancellation of $10,000 for individuals making up to $150,000 and $20,000 for lower income people. So a huge blow, but the president is pursuing another avenue called the Higher Education Act, which he's saying is going to take longer, but is another possibility. What I think he should do, let me just close on this, and sorry for the long answer. I think he should just cancel the $10,000 and $20,000 outright and force the Supreme Court to figure out a way to force people to pay back into the program after the president cancels it. But this president is an institutionalist, so he's not used to doing things that way. The state of emergency, I think, provides him the opportunity to do that.
For the constituents that you represent and for the audience here, since there has been some talk about student loans being an asset that is traded kind of like mortgage-backed securities in 2007 and 2008, will we ever see 20 million, 30 million loans just eradicated? Or will it be like a tiered system of maybe like a maximum of $1 million to $2 million? Because when I talk to people, the sentiment is, well, they're just trying to do this to get votes and it's never going to pass. Is there any perfect utopian situation where 20 million, 30 million people may get relief from having these loans off their back?
Yes, there is. But our democracy is what we make it. I need to emphasize that point. The previous president, Donald Trump, chose 3 Supreme Court justices. Because he had the ability to do that, because he was elected, now the Supreme Court is ultra conservative. So you are going to see the Supreme Court siding less with policies that we all care about, like canceling student debt, like affirmative action, like voting rights. So I cannot emphasize enough how important elections are, because the president decides who goes into the Supreme Court. Now, taking a step back, it's not just about the Supreme Court. It's about who we elect into Congress and who we elect into the Senate. Yeah. Because if you have the wrong people in those seats, which we currently have right now, then we are not going to write or pass any legislation that is going to do what you're talking about. Everyone knows the student loan program is corrupt. It's predatory, and it has been designed in a way that harms borrowers more than it helps them. Because listen, many of us know we were raised to go to college, right? You go into college, go to college. Many of us come from families where we don't know what it takes to go to college. All of a sudden, you get to college, you can't afford it. They dangle this loan in front of you. You think, all right, I'll take out a loan. I'm going to get a job anyway with this degree, so I'm going to be good. I'll pay it back. You take out the loan. You don't really understand the interest rates. You don't get the job that you expected. You're unemployed or you're underemployed. And then when you try to call these third-party companies that work with the Department of Education for redress, lower payments, income-based repayments, they push people to forbearance without even like giving them the background of what other options there were for them. And as a result, collected all this additional money. And that's why the president's recent decision is so important, because it responds to that redress. 803,000 borrowers, you've been paying for 20 years, completely forgiven. That's, I think, the number is $39 billion in total. Not what we wanted, but a good start.